Thank you. You may be seated. Again, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jaron Freed, and I proudly serve as the Assistant Superintendent of the Educational Services Division here at the district. I want to take a few moments before we begin to introduce a few special guests that are with us this morning. I'd like to introduce our board president, Brian O'Neill. We also have Trustee Al Jabbar and Trustee Anna Piercy. We are very lucky to have such a supportive board of directors. Also, I'd like to welcome some of our members here who are from our Anaheim Collaborative and ROP and Feeder Elementary School districts. Thank you very much for being here. I know I saw some representatives from UC Irvine and Cal State Fullerton here as well. And I also want to give a shout out to our colleagues across the district who are joining us via live stream this morning. We have our Hope School staff and moderate to severe teachers and instructional aides at Hope School. We have our Bridges Autism Focus teachers, program specialists, psychologists at Western High School joining us today. We also have our counselors, campus safety aides, family and community engagement specialists, and our social workers back at the district office. So thank you for those who are joining us via live stream this morning. You know, personally, I am truly excited for what the day will bring. To kick things off for us this year, we thought we would bring a student up to remind us of why we are all here. As she speaks, I want you to reflect upon the incredible influence we have in shaping, inspiring, and empowering our youth to live their life to the fullest potential. I also want you to think about when we create these teachable moments and experiences in our classrooms or on the fields or courts or even in our offices, what is possible not just for them, but for our larger community. I'm going to bring up a student named Anika Nwankwa. She is a current senior at Oxford Academy. Best known for her bright personality and ambitious attitude, she is a dedicated student athlete and active leader on her school campus. This year, Anika competes as a CIF qualifier on the varsity girls swim team and serves her campus as the Black Student Union Secretary and current Vietnamese Student Association President. In her final year of high school, Anika is helping to lead a community project hoping to spread awareness of the importance of the upcoming 2020 census. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome to the stage one of our very own students, Anika Nwankwa.
Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing? Good. Can you hear me? Good? Okay, awesome. So hello, my name is Anika Nwankwa, and here's my voice. Being a first-generation Vietnamese American, my life exists as a tree with Vietnamese roots grown in American soil. Eating spaghetti with chopsticks, translating parent-teacher conferences from English to Vietnamese, and celebrating Thanksgiving with a big bowl of pho. My Vietnamese and American sides coexist. Like many others, I grew up listening to the struggles of my parents as they came to America seeking a better future. These stories often entailed the struggles of boat people, highlighting the difficult journey on the overcrowded boats, the shortages of food and water, the endless days and even months at sea, and the fear of not surviving these times of hardship. Avoiding telling the gruesome details of their journey, my family's stories were clear. Escaping Vietnam was a serious risk they took in order to find a better future for their children and their grandchildren. In communist Vietnam, my parents' lives were invisible. They came to America where their lives had meaning, where their lives mattered, and where their lives were counted. These stories have taught me that being in America means being counted. Every 10 years, our government conducts a census with the sole purpose of counting our country's population, counting all people in all places. Many community institutions such as hospitals, libraries, churches, and most importantly, schools depend on the accuracy of the census because it leads to much more funding for these institutions to function. As the numbers of immigrants grow in our nation, due to the lack of participation, it has led to an undercount, further leading to a domino effect of consequences directly impacting not only ourselves, but our schools and our communities. I'm sorry. Yeah. So, why is the census so critical to public schools? It determines the distribution of more than $14 billion in Title I funding. It determines the distribution of $11.3 billion in special education funding and $11.6 billion in the National School Lunch Program. The census has grown important to me because being counted matters. Filling out the census reinforces the fact that immigrants who had undergone struggles and sacrifices to establish a home in a non-native country belongs. Filling out the census provides youth like me with the right materials and needed funding to ensure a proper education and promising future. Filling out the census recognizes the voices of the underrepresented communities as a whole, not only in the Anaheim Union High School District, but throughout Orange County. As a daughter of an immigrant, I encourage you to participate in the upcoming 2020 census. Not only does it give the chance for students like me to live out the American dream my parents had hoped for, but it also brings to light that the Vietnamese American community and all other immigrant communities as a whole belong in this country and deserve to be counted. Thank you.
Isn't she great? You know, Annika, I want to thank you for coming to the stage to share your story and your passion. You speak of an issue that affects all of us in this room. You know, every day we talk to our educators about the work that we want to do to empower our students, but I want you to know that you inspire us. So thank you for the work that you did and speaking in front of 1,500 educators this morning, so thank you. You know, as we think about our drivers and educational priorities or initiatives in this district, Annika beautifully exemplified the 5 C's in action. Clearly, putting a soapbox or an AUHSD talk together is a sophistication process, as it requires students to engage in each of those skill sets. Annika went through an intense writing process with multiple revisions that took her to the place where we saw this speech this morning. And as educators, we all know that when we give students voice and choice, it can absolutely have a positive impact on your school culture. Before I bring our superintendent to the stage to give his welcome address, I want you to know something that you may not be familiar with as regards to Mike, our superintendent. Over the past few years, at the request of many school districts, both numerous state and national conferences across this country, Mike travels throughout our nation speaking to the meaningful work all of you are doing. So many educators across the country and now the globe, as a result of our international program, want to know how a large urban school district can do what we are doing. As you know, the world of work is changing, yet most educational institutions are not, but we are. With over 60 corporate partners now and nonprofit agencies working through our AIM program, more and more corporate partners want to join our team. Be proud of the great work all of you are doing. It is being noticed. Our students, because of you, will be ready for the uncertainties that lie ahead in our evolving world. At this time, to say a few words of welcome and to celebrate you, and to introduce our keynote speaker, I am proud and privileged to bring up our superintendent, Mr. Michael Matsuda.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. Wow. Good morning. Yeah, there you go. All right. And also good morning to all of our friends throughout the district over at Oxford, the VAPA and math teachers. Good morning to you. Good morning to our counselors and our faces and everybody at the district office. And I understand we have a group of special ed teachers over at Hope, too. Good morning to you. I'd like to acknowledge the fact that, as Jaron said, we are out in front, and I do believe we're turning the corner in terms of our branding. I think one big indicator of that is the recent success of the College and Career Fair, in which we had over, 8,000 parents from not just throughout the district, but outside of the district. I think that deserves a round of applause. In fact, there are many teachers who participated, and of course our administrators participated in that. But the parents from outside the district are interested in transferring in because of you, because of our teachers, because of the 5 C's. We're doing something a lot different than any of our surrounding districts, and I think it's making a difference in terms of our overall branding. So I want to spend a minute or so, a couple minutes, acknowledging the teachers, you, who have stepped it up to really help improve your game so that the students truly do have an unlimited you potential and possibility in future. So I'd like you to stand. And those of you at Oxford and at the district office, please stand if you participated in the College and Career Fair. Admins too, please stand right now. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. I'd like you to stand if you participated in the teacher learning walks. Please stand. For the last 2 years, if you participated in a teacher learning walk. That's awesome, you guys. That is incredible. Please stand if you have participated in the civic engagement training, including mikvah training. Please stand. I understand we have over 200 teachers that are trained in that, and that's why we're seeing the results with students like Annika. Please stand if you participated in the mindfulness training. Yeah, there you go. Awesome. Thank you. Please stand if you've participated in the Teach FX training. Teach FX, there you go. Please stand if over the past few years you've participated in the Writing Institute. Writing Institute, we've had a number of teachers in there. Please stand if you've taken advantage of our own Gallagher Learning Labs. If you've come to visit Gallagher in action. Look at that. It's awesome. Please stand if you've participated in any of the AVID institutes. AVID. There we go. Awesome stuff. Please stand if you participate in the UCI Pathway program. It's been some years, but we have an amazing group of teachers that are trained. Please stand if you've presented or taught during the Gear Up Summer Institutes. And that would include any Gear Up staff that we have here. Thank you. This is for our math people at Oxford. Please stand if you participated in OC Math. Hopefully they're all standing. I guess we've had a number of math teachers who've stepped it up, and they have presented at math conferences throughout the country. So that's something we can all be proud of. Please stand if you are a current club advisor. Club advisor, check this out. Look at that. Please stand if you currently coach a sport, either in intramurals or any of the sports. Here we go. And this one should be a lot of people. Please stand if you participated in Capturing Kids' Hearts training. Look at that. And I do want to take a second to acknowledge the teachers who you're going to see, your own teachers, teach you and teach us. The teachers who have stepped it up this morning, who are volunteering to presenting a flare. Please stand if you are a presenter for the flare. Look at that. You're going to see all these people. Amazing. Okay, so now it's time to introduce our featured speaker. We all know who he is. He is someone who has stepped it up all his life. When I was a reading and English teacher at Oxford, and then moved to, or before that, moved from Orangeview in Oxford, he was the curriculum specialist, and I was a big fan of Kelly's, just like many of you, and impressed with his knowledge and his willingness to share his knowledge with regular new people like me, right? He'd always have a door open, although back in those days I was intimidated by him because he comes across, sometimes intimidating because he's so smart and you just want to keep up with him. When I became superintendent was when we had a serious talk about sort of the state of reading and writing in the district. And I know that he, along with Mike Switzer and many of the other English ELA leaders, felt that we needed, to emphasize literacy across the curriculum, and the Writing Journey was born out of that because it is literacy across the curriculum. It aligns with the state standards, and it's an expectation that our kids have that ability to read and write regardless of the curriculum. And I think that made a lot of sense to me, and here we are 5 years later, leading in many, many areas as other districts are struggling. And the reason why we're leading is because of people like you who have stepped it up, but also people like Kelly Gallagher. We are so blessed and lucky to have a national expert in literacy right in our own backyard. I kind of Twitter now and then. I've got maybe 20 or 30 followers. Kelly has, get this, he has 70,000 followers. 70,000. Yeah, there you go. He's amazing. He has spoken. He has been the keynote speaker at 47 states. So, in our own backyard, we have someone who is internationally recognized. And by the way, he's also been a keynote in many countries outside the United States, in Asia, Canada, several times. So he has an international following. And, if you have not had a chance to participate in his literacy labs, regardless of what content you teach, you should take advantage of that, because we have, a treasure in our own backyard. And I am very, very grateful to him, as all of us should be, for leading this initiative. It's hard work, as you know. It's hard work to really focus on literacy, on writing and speaking and reading, when there are so many other distractions for our kids. So, I don't, his bio, if you look at his bio, it's 3 pages long. And I said, Kelly, I'm not going to read your bio. So, because it's just amazing, this guy, what he's accomplished. And he's in our own backyard. And it gives me great honor to introduce, once again, our very own Kelly Gallagher.
Oh, thanks, Mike. That was super nice. Thank you so much. Go ahead and turn that off because I'm going to use this. There's no way I'm living up to that introduction, but thank you. And good morning, AUHSD family. Good morning. So my plan is this is going to be a talk where we celebrate. We celebrate all the people who just stood up. We celebrate everybody in the room. I think it's harder than ever. This is my 35th year of teaching. I think what we're doing is really hard. And so I want to make this a celebratory hour. But to do that, I need to contrast a little bit with what's going on outside of the Anaheim Union High School District universe. So first, I think we need a little context. I'm going to ask one last stand-up question. I'm going to tell a 1985 story. Is anybody in this room teaching in 1985? Would you please stand up, please? That's awesome. What the hell are you still doing here? Oh, wait a minute, I'm here too. 1985 was an interesting year. For the new ones in the room, stand up if you've taught less than 5 years. Stand up. Let's welcome the next generation, right? So for those of you who just stood up, I'm going to explain a few things to you about 1985. We had this president who was reelected. His name was Reagan. We also had the hottest TV show in the nation was Miami Vice. Who remembers that, right? Pete Rose became the all-time hit leader before he became the all-time gambling leader. This new artist put out her first record. Her name was Madonna. Peter Uberoth was Man of the Year for shepherding a flawless 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles. And William the Refrigerator Perry, that's right, and the Bears won the Super Bowl. That was in 1985. I was here in 1985. I was hired by Gene Mangan at Magnolia High, which was really great because I was not hired by Warren Stevenson at Kennedy High School, so thank you, Warren. But 1985 was my first year at Magnolia, and I want to frame our talk today around a book I read in 1985 that's come back into my mind a little bit. It's called The Shopping Mall High School. Now, this isn't a criticism of us. This is sort of a look at the world education world in 1985. And what the authors argued was that school had kind of become a consumption experience. That schools were like malls, right? Like some shoppers, some students know exactly what they want when they go to the mall. Others are only there to browse certain stores. Some students shop at the discount stores while others shop only at the high-end retailers. I thought it was such a fascinating metaphor. Teachers were like salespersons competing for that kid to play this sport instead of that sport or to get into this program instead of that program. And their concern was back then was that many students, and especially the average students, were really adept at avoiding learning, right? That the accommodations made to hold students sort of in check, that they make this argument that when a kid comes into your class, it doesn't take the kid very long to figure out what is the treaty going to be between you and the kid. And by the end of the first week, kids kind of get an idea. In this class, I'm going to have to put the pedal to the metal. In this class, I can go cruise control. Like the kids try to figure that out right away. And sadly, what they found was that it's easy to avoid learning and to still graduate. And worse, that people would graduate and they would think they were prepared to move on into post-secondary or into employment, and they weren't. This is the negative part of the presentation. It's almost over. So, they got kids in school, But the kids, when they were there, did not work super, super hard. And so it's kind of interesting, this word they came up with is that schools began to tolerate unspecialness. I just think that's really kind of an interesting way of looking at it. So that was my first year teaching, 1985. And so here we are all these years later. And I know Mike touched on a bunch of things that many of you in this room are doing and working super hard with kids. So I thought what we'd do is kind of talk about how do we avoid the shopping mall high school, because I think we are avoiding the shopping mall high school here in Anaheim. Back then, what did the researchers find when they saw deep learning in classrooms? Like what were some of the hallmarks they noticed when they went into classrooms where kids were really actively and deeply learning? What they found was that teachers who take seriously the goal of thinking rarely allow students to be passive for very, very long. That means kids are doing stuff, often a lot of speaking and a lot of writing going on in the class. And then this one phrase that's always kind of stuck with me is this idea that in really, really humming and vibrant classrooms, there is a mutual intensity. There is an intensity from the teacher. We're serious. We're in here. We're working. Let's go. I love my content. I want to share that love with you. And that intensity rubs off on the students. And so you kind of get this feel of a mutual intensity in the classroom. That idea has been stolen by other books over the years. This one was a New York Times bestseller later on. Like, you should teach like your hair's on fire, right? But this idea that teachers understand the importance of mutual intensity is something that I thought about when I was thinking about preparing this talk and looking around the district at all the really meaningful learning experiences that our kids are receiving. So I want to argue today in my short talk that we are, as a district, moving away from the shopping mall high school. How are we doing that? Well, you could teach like Melinda Moen, who teaches visual arts at Western High School. Where are you, Melinda? Are you in your room somewhere? And Raquel Solorzano Duenas, who teaches history at Western, right? You go into their classroom, you will see evidence that their kids are thinking critically in those content areas. In fact, why don't we, thanks to John and his work, why don't we take a look into their classrooms? How cool is that? How cool is that? That is not the shopping mall high school. The idea that, we're going to teach kids to really, really, really critically think and to be actively involved is one way we avoid the shopping mall high school. Another way we avoid the shopping mall high school is, I would suggest, teach like Jack Gupton, who teaches STEAM, Industrial Arts, AP Computer Science at both Kennedy and Walker, and Shannon Hoos, who teaches math, laser tech, Mesa. Math's not with us today, but Jack and Shannon work very hard to get at the C that stands for creativity. So let's take another little 3-minute look at that. Give it up for Jack and Shannon. This idea, of course, creativity has been drowned out of a lot of schools in sort of this race to the top. No Child Left Behind from the Republicans, and then race to the top from the Democrats have kind of created a testing culture where creativity isn't often as valued as we hope it would be. So I'm going to argue today, based on some of these videos that you've seen and some that you are about to see, that we are moving away in the AUHSD from this idea of the shopping mall high school. If you look nationally, High school graduation rates are really, really high. Kids are making it to the finish line of K-12. But, you know, I kind of want to just suggest that we should be careful and not be fooled by that. The bad news is that a lot of kids who are graduating from high school are unprepared for either college or the workplace. If you teach at a high poverty school like I do, the percentage of students who are accepted into four-year universities has a 70% dropout rate when they get into the four-year university. And it would be a mistake to think that it's only the kids from lower socioeconomic status schools who are struggling when they get to college. Many kids who come from schools with a lot of good test scores aren't doing very well in college, which I think says something about the testing culture not valuing the kinds of thinking, the kinds of writing that kids are asked to do once they leave us. So what we want to do is kind of play with this idea. You know, we know there's a college admissions scandal. I think we're all aware of that one, right? But what I want to suggest is there's not enough attention given to the college completion scandal. And if you've read Paul Tuff's book, How Children Succeed, the United States has a problem of limited and unequal college completion. In college completion, the percentage of entering college freshmen who go on to graduate, the U.S. ranks second to last, ahead of only Italy. Long ago, the U.S. led the world in producing college graduates, but now it leads the world in producing college dropouts. So it kind of brings me way back to 1985 in that book. You know, that it's easy to appear that you have been educated, but, you know, if you've kind of made the deal with that teacher that we're all going to behave and kind of just get through this. But that's not the case for a lot of kids. You know, our kids who are college bound, there are demands that are awaiting them that if we as K-12 educators do not adequately prepare them for that, you know, then I think we play a part in that. I would say that in the AUHSD, though, that we are certainly moving away from getting away from that, and that's, of course, the reason we're here today. We're here today for the 6th time. We've been here 6 years in a row, and I want to celebrate what's been going on in the last 6 years. Many of you stood up. You weren't here 6 years ago, so this would be new for you. Some of you, it may be a little bit of a brief review before we head back to where we're heading. But we thought we'd take a minute and kind of back up to what we've done in this auditorium for the last 6 years. So in 2014, we introduced something called the Hsd Riding Journey. We played with this idea that riding should be taught across the curriculum, that there's a big difference between assigning riding and teaching riding. Assigning riding is really easy. Teaching riding is really hard. And so we began with this idea of why. We looked at the research. Langer and Appleby did a national study in 2013. They also did a national study 30 years prior to that. And they found the same things in both studies, that when students write, first and foremost, they reach deeper levels of understanding. If you're a history teacher, you're teaching the Civil War, the kids, Langer and Appleby found, the kids will not internalize their deepest understanding of the Civil War unless they're actually kind of thinking that through via writing. So it's super important that they learn the content ideas. The second idea is this idea that writing is not just a vehicle that enables you to spit out what you know. I mean, we all done this, right? Read chapter 4, answer the question. And now I can read the student's response and figure out formatively who gets it and who doesn't get it. We all do that. I do that. But we've often forgotten that there's a second reason why kids should be doing a ton of writing, and that is because the act of writing itself generates thinking you did not even know you had before you commenced into that act. The actual act of putting a pen to paper or fingers to keyboard leads you to thinking you did not know you had. Writing is generative. It generates brand new thinking. It enhances their thinking and reasoning abilities. It's harder to express what you're thinking when you have to put it down on paper. And this is, I think, the super bonus for all of us in this room. What Langer and Appleby are suggesting is that not only will they learn your stuff better and deeper and richer, they'll remember it longer. And I don't think there's probably a single teacher in this room who would not want that to happen in your own classroom. So the big idea is that when students write, they generate deeper thinking in your content area. All right, so from there we went to how are we going to do this? We made the point that we want to make sure that the kids get a rich writing pathway through the district. So, that maybe a lab report in 9th grade should look like a lab report in 12th grade. I don't know the answer to that question, but we put science teachers in a room and they figured that out themselves. We also made the point that whether a student writes or not should not be a quirk of the master schedule. I'll just make up a content area. If you have a 9th grade earth science teacher over here and the kids are doing a lot of writing, and you have a 9th grade teacher over here and the kids are not doing any writing, that is not meeting the literacy needs of all of our students. So if you believe the slides that I just shared with you, the benefits of writing, that they will learn your stuff, they will remember it more, we set the expectation. We didn't really set the expectation. I mean, it's in every standard, right? Your content area standards ask kids to write. So we talked a lot about that. The volume problem, I think, remains, and that is both for reading and writing. I want to share a little bit from this month's edition of Educational Leadership, or the most current edition. The October edition's not out yet. But in this most recent edition of Educational Leadership, Mike Schmoker wrote a piece called Focusing on the Essentials. If you don't know Mike, he's written a couple really, really powerful books, Focus and Results Now, and really rich. I recommend them highly. And Schmoker in this article basically says schools need three things. They need a clear, coherent curriculum, right, which is what we're talking about here. And kids need sound instruction. And the third thing he mentions in this article is that kids need what he calls authentic literacy. So it's a volume problem. What does he mean by authentic literacy? On the reading side, what Schmoker, this is not his work, this is based on work that researchers that he has studied, has said the following, that students should read or be read to for a minimum of 60 minutes daily in school, right, across the curriculum at every grade level. It doesn't mean 60 minutes in my class and 60 minutes in your class, but it means a totality that while that kid's at Western High today, or Magnolia High, or Ball Junior High, that kid should be asked to physically do at least an hour of reading throughout the day. And in saying that, he says it's foundational, of course, for kids to become writers. I did this experiment years ago. I took 9th grade writers, and this is back in the day when we actually turned in physical papers, and I had the kids write an essay, and I had them not put their names on them, and I collected them in stacks, and I tried to be predictive. And I said, I had three piles. This kid's a writer, this kid's a reader, this kid's not a reader, this kid might be a reader. And I just looked at their writing to determine, oh yeah, that kid reads a lot. Oh yeah, that kid doesn't read at all, right? I'm looking, if you've read a lot of essays, you know this already. You can tell by looking at the writing who in the classroom has an extensive history of reading. They are not separate. They are very tightly intertwined. If you look at Frank Smith is a famous reading researcher in Canada. He basically says this, that all the nuts and bolts of writing, including spelling, punctuation, and grammar, but more importantly, the subtle style and structure of standard discourse, the appropriate organization of sentences and paragraphs, and the appropriate selection of words and tones of voice are learned through reading. This point deserves emphasis. You learn to read by reading, and you learn to write by reading. And if you have kids like me who don't write very well, I'm guaranteeing you that's rooted in a lack of reading history. And so if we're serious about building writers, we have to come back to this idea that we should be serious about building readers. Since the last time I talked on this stage, this book also came out, Reader Come Home. Marianne Wolf is a brain researcher, and her work is looking at how the reading brain develops in human beings. If those of you who have small children at home, I recommend the book highly. For the rest of us, it might be a little too late. But read her, come home. What does she say? Two big points that really stuck out to me in that book is, number one is that we need biliterate readers. We need kids who can do click and go reading, which is the kind of reading most of us do. I do it, you do it. It's super important. When you have waves of information coming at you, knowing where to click and what not to click and where to go and where not to go is a really intense skill. It's a kind of reading that's never been seen before in the history of human beings. And so we need kids who can click and go read. But what she also says is that we need kids who can go cover to cover in a book, because the reading skills that are required to hold on to your thinking over 300 pages is a very different reading skill than click and go. And what's happening in an age of distraction addiction is that children have lost their ability to think over time and to hold on to that thinking over time. So, and part of that's the testing culture. The current Smarter Balance tests, any test we've ever had is standardized in the state or district. None of them have valued a 300-page read, because a kid can't sit down at a test and read a 300-page book. So the testing culture has actually promoted one kind of reading to the detriment of other kinds of reading that are really, really important for our kids to have. The second thing she said that I thought was really interesting is that when people acquire a reading habit is extraordinarily important. The human brain develops most rapidly until your early 20s. And what Marianne Wolf found is that if you exercise your brain while you're in that brain developmental stage, that has lifelong benefits. It's a simplistic approach, but she basically says you use it or you lose it. And people who do not think critically when they're 12 do not learn how to think critically when they're 50. It's important that exercise happens while that brain is rapidly developing. For the kids who are on the SAT track, kids are college bound, the new SAT is really heavy oriented towards reading. So they put a lot more words on there. So if you don't read well and happily, as they say, this test is not going to be your friend. Some kids score low on the SAT. It's not because they can't read, it's because they can't read fast enough and they can't process it fast enough. So that's the reading side. On the writing side, what Smoker says in his article is that students should write for at least 40 minutes, not in each class, but across a school day. Kids should be writing 40 minutes every single day, and that every teacher, regardless of content, should know how to one, incorporate appropriate amounts of writing into their subject area, and two, teach students to write a claim, cite evidence to support the claim, and then explain why that's good evidence. So that is, again, across the content area. So this is how we get away from shopping mall high school. This is how we give kids a diploma that when they graduate in 12th grade, they know they're ready to go, because there are no shortcuts. There are no shortcuts to actually, hard reading and lots of reading and lots of writing. So I thought that was fascinating. What he concludes is this: if we can do this across the content areas in a given day at our schools, that the results would be game-changing impact on kids. So this idea of the writing journey is really, trying to move away from that whole thing. I've shown some of these before. When we launched the writing journey, we had all kinds of teachers, all kinds of content areas across the district do. I think when we talk to administrators, I've talked to administrators across the district, I think it's almost universally accepted that the volume of writing really increased in the AUHSD. I'm going to come back and show you evidence of that later. But all the way from, Hope, all the way across the district, kids are composing. I saw Rob this morning. I hope, his kids are still writing over at Dale. They're writing in math. So this is really, really good for kids. Kids need small writing. They need big writing, right? And so again, across the content area, note-taking, all writing is better than no writing, right? And so different kinds of writing have different kinds of value, but all writing is better than no writing. We miss Autumn, don't we? Autumn Brown. Marianne, you're in the room somewhere. You're mixing writing with art. That's really cool stuff, right? Shannon, Marianne again in our dance classes. So again, the good news is we are doing a lot more writing. We actually talked about, can writing affect athletic performance? For the coaches in the room, this book is really fascinating, that this college coach had his kids write in journals about their performance, and as a result, their performance really, really went up. I think that's really fascinating. So avoiding, so that was the first year. The second year, we maintained a focus on the writing journey, and we had a good friend of mine and noted author Penny Kittle came and shared some thinking. She reinforced a lot of what we were talking about then at that time. But I think the one slide, and I pulled this from her presentation, I think the one slide that really stood out to me is that when you have kids read something, what's the best way to get them to think about and remember that reading is to write about it. Because writing about it's better than just reading it. It's better than just reading it and rereading it. It's better than just rereading it and studying it. It's better than reading and discussing it. It's better than reading and studying it, right, or receiving reading instruction. So we felt so strongly that writing should be going on across the curriculum that Penny came in and she shared some strategies with us, right? I think one of the most radical things that she shared with us is that the teacher should actually get up and write in front of the kids. I was in an AP European history class somewhere where the teacher in front of the students took the exam in front of them and thought out loud as he was writing his responses. I think it was one of the most valuable lessons those kids saw in there. And so getting this idea of the teacher as a model in the room. I know as a writing teacher myself, if I do the writing as well, it informs my instruction in ways that just assigning the writing does not do. She also talked about this idea, which I've implemented in my classroom. I think this is the number one little 2-minute strategy I do in my class that really elevates my kids' writing. My kids think that we do a little quick write, right? Kids need a lot of low-pressure, ungraded writing. My kids do a little quick write. My kids think that the only time you do revision is when you've written a big old formal paper. We do daily, 90 seconds, flash revision of anything we write in a class. So if you have your kids write anything in class, I just say take 90 seconds, go back and make it better. And that daily tinkering of the writing is really, really important for them. So Penny came and shared some of that with us. Lots of talk in the classroom. She showed some photos from her classroom of her 19 students in New Hampshire. But after the kids have written, I've done this in my class of 38 kids, right? Everybody's written, okay, now share some thinking, right? It's that turn and talk time that becomes really important. A lot of times the teacher and the kids are writing on the board, that writing becomes very, very central to the classroom. So studying the craft and structure of texts and practice with academic vocabulary. If that was not enough writing reinforcement, the district asked Smokey Daniels to come out in 2016. Smokey's also very well known. He's written more books than I can count. And we spent a whole day talking about collaborative writing. Writing Next is the largest study of secondary writing done in the United States in the last 20 years. And in that study, it's not one study, it's a meta-analysis of about 125 different studies about writing. They looked at junior high classrooms and they looked at high school classrooms where writing was really good, and what they found were certain things. They found 11 things that happen in classrooms where kids write well. One of those 11 is that kids should be, and I'm not really good at this, I've been trying to work on it a little bit more in my own classroom, is that kids should be writing collaboratively, composing together as a way. And so Harvey, or Smokey, talked about this when he came, and in my own classroom, I am working on having kids try to compose a little bit more together. So I was influenced by his talk there. We now have a writing journey at every school in the AUHSD after that 3 years of work. And it is now digital. But I think it is very critical that this is not seen as an initiative. I know a lot of times, and I've been here 35 times, right, that the district kind of launches something and it's kind of the flavor of the year for a year or two. But I would think that, as professional teachers who want to teach content, that we have come to a point, I think, professionally where we recognize the research is very clear about the importance of writing in the classroom. And long after I'm not standing on this stage anymore, long after I've retired, I would hope that this isn't looked at as an initiative, because initiative has kind of a connotation that it's going to go away. It's just really rich in good literacy instruction. If you look at the national writing scores right now, NAEP is the most reliable national writing scores. It's given every 2 years in the junior high, and it's given every few years in the high school. The last NAEP, before, they had a recent one, but the one before that, what percentage of kids do you believe scored at advanced as writers, secondary students in the United States of America? What percentage scored at advanced? Would you take a 5-second prediction with your shoulder partner? Turn and talk just for a moment. All right, come on back. So the last time they released scores, the percentage of kids in the United States who scored at advanced or higher was 3%. 3, okay? Some of you are high-fiving, which I find highly inappropriate. Yeah, I'm right, it's only 3%. Yeah. Now that was 2 times ago. Recently they released their new scores. Let's take a look. Oh, my bad. They were not released. Good question. So when I go to the website and I try to figure out why, okay, I'm going to read this to you because it is so lame, okay? Here's what it says. The NCES shared these findings with members of expert panels regularly consulted before the release of assessment results to assure NAEP's high standard of reliability and validity. Among these were NCES's Design and Analysis Committee and the NAEP Validity Studies Panel. NCES also consulted with the Committee on Standards, Design, and Methodology of the National Assessment Governing Board. NCES, with the committed support of these expert panels and NAGB, decided not to release the results to avoid any possible misrepresentation of students' writing skills. And I'm like, what? So I know somebody on the NAEP board. What happened was the kids, they went from writing by hand to writing on tablets. And the scores dropped so bad, they don't know if it's because of the tablets. I called an anonymous board member, and I said, what does this mean? I quote her exactly. This is government speak, for the scores were so low they were afraid to release them. So, not here. Our kids are writing. But out in the shopping mall high school, they're not writing. Kids are not writing. I talk to kids in schools all the time. How much you reading? They're not reading either. Remember how we talked about how reading connects with writing? They did release the reading scores. These are 4th grade reading scores. Look where proficient is nationally. They're very flatlined. If you look at 8th grade reading scores, still below proficient. the last 30 years. Kids are not reading and writing enough. But you know what? These are the kids who are coming out of high schools out there who believe they are prepared when they get to the university or the workplace, and then reality hits them, right? And so real literacy work is really hard, and it's really important, and that's why we spent in this room 3 years talking about this, and this is why now you can go online, you can see the senior English team at Magnolia High School has decided what their reading map is going to look like, and when you go to that website and you punch in Magnolia, you can go to the teachers and you can go to mine, and you can see the kinds of writing that I'm going to be teaching in this class. It is so foundational for kids to be literate human beings that we spent 3 years on that. 2017, we pivoted a little bit. Pedro Negura came in, professor at UCLA. That 1 hour in this room profoundly changed my thinking when he said this. He says, you know what? As educators, we are asking the wrong question. The wrong question is, what can we do to raise achievement? And he stood right here and he said, we should be asking a different question. The question we should be asking as educators is, what can we do to challenge and engage and stimulate our kids? Because if you challenge, engage, and stimulate kids, there's going to be that mutual intensity that we're aiming for in our classrooms. So he gave that talk of excellence through equity. It's interesting, this idea, right, of, he made me think a lot about this idea that there's a difference between compliant reading and writing and engaged reading and writing. I think there's a lot of compliant reading and writing going on. I also think there's a lot of task-oriented reading and writing going on. And I don't want to suggest that I never ask my kids questions, but I want to say this. If I have my kids study this thing, and I want to know what they know, I'm going to have them generate thinking before. This came out of Pedro's talk. I'm going to have them generate thinking before I ask them the questions. So, for example, in my class, kids are in book clubs right now, and when they come, we meet every Thursday. They read a big chunk of the book, and when we meet every Thursday, I don't greet them with 4 questions. If I say to a kid, read this chunk, here's my 4 questions, when I hand that kid the 4 questions, I've now determined what that kid's going to think and what that kid's not going to think, because I have shoehorned that kid into my 4 questions. I might ask the 4 questions, but I'm not going to start with them. I'm going to ask kids to generate their own thinking first, and that's the literal assignment in my class. You've read this big chunk of text. When you show up on Thursday, I want a 2-page evidence in your notebook that you have been thinking about what you have been reading. I am not going to determine what that thinking looks like. That thinking looks different for different kids, but I am not going to be the person who determines what that thinking looks like. Thinking can look a lot of different ways, right? But I want evidence that you have been thinking about this text. And so these are just some, I forgot how many I put in here, right? Now, I might come in behind these and ask questions, but I'm going to start by what's worth talking about? What do you think is worth talking about in this text? So again, and I bring these in and share them with kids, because not all of my kids do this kind of work. Some do really lousy work at the beginning, because my kids are afraid of the blank page. They would rather me give them the 4 questions. They would rather, just give me the 4 questions, I'll answer them. We'll have this treaty where you give me the questions and I'll just kind of give you the answer, and we'll all get along, right? That's not how it's going to, they don't like this at the beginning. They're not used to it, but when they get in groups and they talk, they have to bring their own thinking to that conversation, and I try not to, again, be the determiner initially of what that looks like. I would also add this as well. This is Penny's idea. She does this, I'm going to show it to you in an ELA class, and then I'll kick around what it might look like in another content area. But let's say your kids study this unit, whatever it is. In my room, it might be a book. Penny has kids actually capture beautiful words. So, and she's annoying because her notebooks belong in the Smithsonian, right? But as you read a book, what's the beautiful language? Give me a 2-page spread of beautiful language. So when kids are asked to do that, they generate beautiful words in their reading. This is very different than read chapter 4 and answer the 4 questions, which may come in soon, but not yet, right? So kids then generate their own beautiful words. I'm wondering in a science class or a history class of instead of beautiful words, maybe it's important words or words worth thinking about. So if I'm studying World War II and I'm looking at infographics and charts and maps and graphs and YouTube videos and firsthand accounts of people who were there, I'm reading through a very rich data swim in that unit. What are the beautiful words that capture that historical moment? And so we ask kids to do that. So how do we get kids to, if we're going to get to the equity issue, sorry, that's stuck on me a little bit. I think a lot about the words that I use in front of my kids, right? Peter Johnston years ago wrote a book. It's a really tiny book. I think it's a really important book called Choice Words. And what Johnston argues is the way we talk to kids has immeasurable influence on their motivation. And sometimes we motivate, and sometimes we demotivate unintentionally by the language that comes out of our mouth. So for example, you walk into third period tomorrow and a kid has his head down, right? You say to the kid, get your head up. That's a very different approach than, hey, are you feeling okay? And I'm fascinated because I read this article in, of all places, the Harvard Business Review. I found it on an airplane. And they talked about motivation. And this applies to coaches. This applies if you're the manager at McDonald's. The article was, how do we best motivate people to move forward? I want to share a little of that article. It's really interesting. Learning is less a function of adding something that isn't there than it is of recognizing, reinforcing, and refining what already is. Neurologically, each brain grows where it is already strongest. Getting attention to our strengths from others catalyzes learning, whereas attention to our weaknesses smothers it. Isn't that interesting, right? It reminds me of the most famous writing teacher in modern American history. It was a guy named Don Murray. Don Murray was a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist for the Boston Globe, who later went to teach at the University of New Hampshire because he couldn't get health care. And so he taught at New Hampshire, and he started this entire writing revolution across the country. Donald Murray says that when you interact with a student paper for the first time, whether you're sitting with the kid or you're at home reading it on a screen, your language to that kid as a writer is really, really important. And your first job as a writer or as a teacher of writing is to receive that paper. I mean, it makes me really think about my language, right? So I've done this in the past for years at Magnolia. I write at the bottom of the paper, your paper's underdeveloped, right? That's a different way of saying, as a reader, I really wanted to. This part's so good. This part is so good right here. I need more. And how we frame our conversations to people we're trying to motivate is really, really important. By helping a student recognize what excellent looks like, by saying, yeah, that right there, yes, that, you're offering him the chance to gain an insight. You're highlighting a pattern that is already there within him so that he can recognize it, anchor it, recreate it, and refine it. That is how we learn. And I used to coach high school basketball. I wish I'd have known this. We excel only when people who know us and care about us tell us what they experience and what they feel, and in particular, when they see something within us that really works. So I've been really, really thinking a lot about this in my classroom. My kids read this chart, okay? Do you know this? 10 companies make all processed foods in the world, right? So my kids were looking at this chart, and I broke them into groups, and I was going to put them in different groups. But I asked each group a different question. So this group over here, my classroom, I asked them, what's worth talking about in this chart? This group over here, what surprised you in the chart? This group over here, what argument could arise from this chart? And this group over here, what does the chart not say? See, I'm not against asking questions, but I'm going to have them wrestle with it first. We might have some conversation, and then I'm going to ask them these kinds of questions, right? So when they looked at that, it was really interesting. One of my kids said, I can't believe Coca-Cola is selling so much water. Like, why is Coca-Cola selling so much water, right? All right, what argument is made there? What's not said there, right? And so these questions come into play, right? Which is very different than if you look at kind of typical book questions. If you compare them, you know, the questions on the left are much, much, much more open-ended and value students creating their own thinking first. So even when I do ask questions, I'm cognizant of Peter Johnston's book, Choice Words, and I'm thinking about Pedro Negura's idea that compliant and engaged reading is different. Task-oriented is different than generate your own thinking first. So how do we do this? Well, we teach kids to communicate. How do we do this? We do it like Susan Freed and Christina McGuire. Susan teaches anatomy at Cypress. Christina teaches SDC, DHH at Catella. And they work very hard at getting kids to work and communicate effectively. Let's take a 3-minute look.
My name is Susan Riding, and I'm a teacher at Cypress High School. I teach 5 sections of human anatomy. I attended on October in-service a TED Talk introduction, and I brought that back to my classroom right away because I realized how TED Talks really fits into the classes. Unlike my spring TED Talks, I do this one in the form of either report. If they do a good enough job, they get to present it live on our stream through Mr. Delgado's class. So you began to start off with a document and then start talking more about separate things. Students all got a group together, and it was really exciting in general to be able to work with like other people. You have to communicate with the world and with the people in the world when you look for jobs. And those jobs mostly involve communication because it's not talking or collaborating with other people. We can't do anything then. The 5 C's are critical for every student to have as a basis before they leave high school into the real world because every job is going to ask them to communicate and work well with others. By me getting an opportunity to kind of introduce this to them in my class, I feel like they have a one-up and then they can go on into whatever role they're going to go to. Well, I teach students with moderate disabilities, so I'm not hearing parents. And what I really want them to do is to be able to have an opinion, have reasons for that opinion, understand why people might have a different opinion, either through writing or through speaking. Since we started the Catella Talks and the TED Talks, I worked really hard to get the kids to talk more.
I need to walk with so it takes me longer to get to class on time. I wish people would be more aware of me and understand how hard it is for me to walk.
We used the teach acrobatics, we started Socratic seminars. I want the kids to talk and I want the kids to have a voice, so I have to try to find material that's relevant for them.
There are people teach them talking and listen and teach person kids communicate better with someone, understanding better.
A lot of times these kids are going to schools don't get a chance to say what they want to say, so I want to make sure that they have that ability because it's going to serve them very well later in life.
Love that. Love, love, love that. So, I mean, you're not going to ensure equity if kids cannot communicate effectively. Of course, another way we get into this idea is exhibited one more time here with Matt Bidwell from South Junior High and Sabina Jacquemus from good old Magnolia. Matt and Sabina are teaching students to effectively collaborate.
For my freshmen, the main thing that I do to implement collaboration is using structured talk time. I found that if I say, go ahead and just talk in your groups, usually there's one or two speakers, and you have one or two students that are silent. Either they're scared or they're not confident in their English language skills. So having structured conversation, having students interrupt, student 1, student 2, student 3, student 4, or student A, student B, and I have, so there's that accountability for what they're saying in the classroom. I usually try to come up with different team orientations for my students to work in. Could be a particular project or an overall unit. And sometimes our collaborative periods last a day, sometimes they last a month depending on what project we're in. One of the assignments that I did recently is I had students engineering microscopes. So in those groups, we were very structured in making sure that we had a facilitator, making sure we had a speaker or a communicator, making sure we had equipment managers so that everyone feels included and involved in the process. To me, collaboration is having an inclusive environment, making sure that everybody's voices are heard, making sure that everyone has a chance to talk. So if we think back to when we were in college, you had a group assignment, and you were that kid that was left out, or maybe you did all the work. Either way, it didn't feel very good, right? So making sure that every student in our class has an equal chance to be a participant in the work that we're doing is important. Well, from what I've seen with the 5 C's in my classroom, regardless of the subject, whether it's woodshop, science, art, I feel like it brings a different level of engagement for the student, brings a little bit of purpose to it. They get the why right away, and that helps me on every level as a teacher, from management to get into that output being much better. So I really appreciate that. And within the woodshop, collaboration is given. It's something that probably already existed in Bachelor of Arts before the 5 C's came out, but now it's just defined and it's intentional. And I think these kind of classes that incorporate 5 C's just bring that out very easily in students. So.
Teach like Matt, teach like Sabina. This idea of collaboration. I know you've been sitting a long time. We're just going to go just a few more minutes. It's interesting when you look at what employers are now saying, like when kids come out of college, what are the skills we want from them? Communication is number one. So this idea, remember in the Shopping Mall High School, the classrooms where kids are actively talking, lots of talk in the classroom. One more. So in 2018, last year, we had Lori DeSautel's here, who talked about social emotional learning. She has a new book out called Eyes Are Never Quiet. Again, a very thoughtful presentation. She really planted in my head this idea that adversity and trauma changes our brains, perceptions, and behaviors in dramatic ways. It's very interesting to me that there's a new book out called The Coddling of the American Mind. And what these college professors have written is that we have never seen as many kids who are depressed or anxious. How many of you feel that with me, right? I mean, it's universal wherever I go. And this is a book that kind of talks about why they think kids have gotten there. But it reminded me of Lori's idea that, most negative behaviors. What did she say? She said, the kid in your class who's the least lovable is the kid in your class who needs the most love, because that misbehavior is often rooted in shame or embarrassment or trauma of something really, really bad that's happened in that kid's life. So Lori's idea, again, is coming back to this social emotional idea that students who are loved at home come to school to learn, but students who are not loved at home come to school to be loved. And if there's no adult connection somewhere on that campus for our most troubled kids, then we're going to lose them. The way we save kids is through having that connection that we try to build with kids every day, capturing kids' hearts, right? So again, one last set of videos, how do we ensure our students are taught character and compassion? I think Lori's message was, we have to demonstrate character and we have to demonstrate compassion. Or we could teach like Amanda Bryant, the AVID coordinator at Orangeview, or coach and teach like Fred DePalma, who's football coach and physical educator at Catella. They do a lot of work with character and compassion. So let's take one last look into some AUHSD classrooms. And that's how you win a CIF championship. Is Amanda and Fred in the room? Where's Fred? The great Fred De Palma, where is he? Amanda, where are you? This idea of teaching character and compassion. So as I wrap up today, I would just want to very briefly, I want to thank John Bautista, who's standing down here, for creating all the videos in a very short time. I could be wrong, but I have a sense that John is also very busy building character and compassion in his life as well. But here we are. So we've been in here 6 years, and I get it. We have had a lot come at us. You know, the riding journey. Let's talk what Penny does. Let's talk what Smokey does. Let's add in a little bit of equity. Let's make sure we address the social, emotional need. I get it. Sometimes it feels like a lot is coming at you. I'm the AVID coordinator. I have to go to a PLC. I get it, right? It's like I have track meet duty. I gotta go cover detention. I get that feeling that it's coming at us all the time. But I just want to close by saying it's really about good teaching. It's really about 5 C's and making sure that writing is woven through the 5 C's. And when I look at all of the stuff that comes at me in my classroom, I think back to Tom Newkirk, who I mentioned in this room before, of the 5% teacher. The best teachers in the world get 5% better every single year. You pick something. Maybe it's one of the C's. Maybe it's the writing. You pick something and you try to get a little bit better at it each and every year. And I want to say, in closing, there is evidence that the work you are doing, we are doing, is paying off. When you look at increased college enrollment, large increases. And we talked about 2 problems with college. One was the admittance problem, right? We're getting way, way more Anaheim Union High School kids into the colleges through the pledge and through your work. And anecdotally, I would suggest there's evidence that it's really, really beginning to work too. I know Jaron has told me that UCI came to him and said, the reason your kids are getting in at a much higher rate than they used to is because, this is the person unprompted saying this to Jaron. The person said, we have noticed your kids' writing ability has gotten a lot better. And this is the reason why we are letting more of them in. And I think that is the reason why more of them are going to come out. The Coddling of the American Mind says our job is not to prepare the road for the child. Our job is to prepare the child for the road. And I want to suggest that the answer to this problem is sitting in this room. The talent is sitting in this room. And I know Jaron or Mike asked you guys to stand, so I won't do it again. But the goal today is that through the little mini lessons you're about to go see and listen to, is that maybe a seed will be planted in which you can walk out here today with an idea of where is my 5% going to be. So I want to thank everybody for your tireless commitment. I want to thank the district for asking me to come up here again, and I'm going to bring Jaron back up to explain today's schedule. Thank you all. I'll put the schedule up.
All right, well, thank you so much, Kelly. We really appreciate your leadership and being here to speak with us again today. You know, I really appreciate the fact that you took us through kind of our memory lane, walking us through the last several years and what we've been through together. And I think about the work we're doing this year with the theories of action, right? Really 3 deep areas of focus, and it connects to the work we've been doing. It is the work around the 5 C's, it is the writing journey, and it's a commitment to developing positive school cultures, all interconnected. Today, you're going to be breaking off. We have a few different things going on here on our Anaheim campus today. We have our health teachers who will be in a section of the campus working on their health needs. We have our science teachers will be on the wing doing their work around the NGSS implementation and their materials. We also have our PE teachers, our physical ed teachers, who will be working together doing deeper work around their instruction. And then we have the remaining teachers that are in the room today, our world language, ELA, ELD, JROTC teachers, CTE teachers, social science teachers that will be in the two-story building working on our mini flares, these mini lessons that encapture the 5 C's, the writing, and the positive school culture concepts that we really want to continue to grow and thrive in our classrooms. What's going to happen now is when I dismiss you, at 10 o'clock is when we'll begin our first session. So you'll be making your way to your rooms. On your badges that you got when you checked in this morning, it has a room number. You will be there for both first and second session. Okay, so you'll be in the same room. That makes it a lot easier for you. Also, just so you know, when we come back after lunch, which will be a little bit earlier today, and that was done with intention so that way those who don't want to take advantage of the food trucks on campus, if you want to go off campus, you can. You should be able to beat the lunch traffic. But the expectation is that you are back in your room by 12:30. Because you're in the same room, if you're late or not there, it will be very obvious. So please make sure you're back by 12:30. We will be back in here. For those doing the flares in the two-story building, we'll be back in here at 2 o'clock for our close. The other folks will be meeting at the bus or leaving at 2:15 like all of us. With that, I hope you have a wonderful day. I appreciate it. We'll see you throughout the campus. Thank you.